Welcome to the Tiny RV Podcast, where we discuss how to travel in a tiny space without spending a lot of money or compromising on life. I'm your host Darren, and in this week's podcast, John Leathers. Hi, and welcome to the first episode of the Tiny RV Podcast. Because this is the pilot episode, I'd like to give you an idea of who I am and what this show is all about. My name is Darren Dawes, and I started this podcast because all the others seem to cater to large RVs. Not all of us want to or can afford to travel in a 40-foot diesel pusher. I consider a tiny RV to be anything van size or smaller. They usually have limited facilities on board, which require the owner to be a bit more clever in how they travel. A tiny RV can also go places that the big rigs can't, allowing you to be as close as possible to your destination, be it a hiking spot or just a long-lost friend's backyard. Some tiny RVs can even blend in and stealth camp for free. I love to keep costs down, and we'll be discussing stealth camping and boondocking in future episodes. I've traveled extensively in a minivan RV, and although I consider van dwellers to be part of the tiny RV community, we're also going to hear from people who travel in teardrops, casitas, car campers, homemade trailers, and anything else in a Class B or smaller RV. If you'd like to know more about my experience with tiny RV travel, you can check out the Odyssey Camper blog at odysseycamper.com. I also have a Facebook and Instagram page with the same name. However, this podcast is not about me. My aim in each episode is to bring you an interview with someone who lives this life, along with a segment of useful information if you're traveling in or considering a tiny RV. So without further delay, here is our first interview with the colorful and entertaining John Leathers. Dr. John has traveled extensively throughout his life, most recently to Alaska in a Scion XB. And you thought your RV was tiny. Please note that this interview is conducted live at RTR, and as such, the sound quality may not be perfect, but I think you'll enjoy the experience. This is recorded live from the 2019 RTR. I'm here with Dr. John Leathers. Dr. John just took an epic trip to Alaska in his Scion XB, which is pretty remarkable. He's a pretty tall guy. I can't imagine being anything smaller than my Odyssey, but we'll talk about him. We'll talk to him about the Scion XB in a couple minutes. You can find John on the Facebook groups Camping Out and Catching Trout, along with BAGMY, which stands for Bear Ain't Got Me Yet. BAGMY, so look them up on Facebook. Private groups, but I'm sure they'll be happy to let you in. So before we get started, though, John, why do they call you doctor?
I first got the handle when I was in the Army in Vietnam as a medic, and then later on I spent about 12 years driving a truck, and of course that was back in the days of the CB radios, and everybody had to have a handle, and that seemed to work pretty well for me. Then I ended up going into computer repair in sales. And, of course, that was a great advertising gimmick. If your computer's sick, call the doctor.
That works. Oh, by the way, if you hear any clanking in the background during this recording that kind of sounds like this, that's a large ice cube floating around in some Kirk and Sweeney Dominican rum. This podcast is sponsored by Kirk and Sweeney. No, not really, but it's a
Darren Dawes, the provider.
It's a Dominican rum that's aged 12 years in oak barrels. Kind of tastes like a Highland single malt scotch. Pretty good stuff. Because if you're going to podcast, you might as well drink while you're doing it. So this wasn't your first trip around Alaska. You've been to Alaska before.
This was my 8th trip up there. And the first one I drove a motorhome for a company that manufactured them to a new dealership. And just needless to say, got hooked on Alaska. It's just absolutely marvelous. Wildlife, scenery, the mountains, everything about it. And been back 7 more times.
Wow. A lot of us are just waiting to go the first time. There's 5 states I haven't been to, and Alaska is one of them. So I'm kind of looking forward to my first trip. Although, when I watched some of your videos and I saw the mosquitoes swarming around, that was frightening. It was like the movie The Birds.
Well, that was unusual, and that's why I made a point of videotaping the experience. It was only up in above the Arctic Circle. As a matter of fact, it was up on the Arctic Ocean where the mosquitoes were just unbelievable. It was like a Sam Peckinpah movie, unimaginable. But in fact, I had some good protection, DEET 40%, which worked amazingly well. The mosquitoes were all around my head, 3 inches away, and drove me nuts, but they didn't bite. The only time I got bit was when I went out of the woods to take care of nature's call, and forgot to put DEET on my butt. So my rear end itched for 2 days.
So, yeah, that's great. So everyone's watching you walk around going, why is that guy picking his ass? So, I want to talk to you a little bit more about Alaska, but let's talk about your Scion XB, because the nature of this program is people that travel around in small vehicles. I say smaller than a Class B, but most of us are in minivans, vans. But you took it to a whole nother level with a Scion. So what's the backstory on that?
Well, I bought my first Scion. This is my second. I bought it 2006, mainly for advertising purposes. The reason I bought it was I heard on the NPR program Car Talk with Bob and Tom. They said that they had a contest, or call in and vote the favorite ugliest production car ever made, and that happened to be the Pontiac Aztec.
Yeah, it's pretty ugly.
And unfortunately, it was sold out, or it wasn't manufactured any longer. The previous year, they stopped producing it. And the second was the Scion. So I thought, well, I want to get some attention for my computer business, so I bought a Scion, 2006. Had it plastered with Scions, home run computers, and Dr. John, this, that, and the other. And every time I'd pull up to a stop sign, everyone would look at it. So it was a great advertising gimmick. But I discovered also it's a great camping machine. I took out all of my seats except for the driver's seat and built a little area for a bed. And, of course, I had plenty of room for storage. I put a rack on the front, on the back, and on the top. And worked out fantastically.
How tall would you say you are? You're
6 foot.
6 foot.
Well, 6'1", actually.
Yeah, that's okay. That would be my guess.
And when you pull the driver's side seat up, as far as it goes, there's exactly 6 feet. And of course, I don't sleep straight out,
sure.
So there's plenty of room. And so it worked out pretty well for me. And then the second one I bought is 2012, and I bought it mainly because it had manual transmission, so I could pull it behind my former Winnebago.
Okay. All right. And actually, John's recently upsized. He's still got his XB. It's parked right outside, and we'll talk a little bit more about his upsizing. But so what modifications? You talked about the bed, but I know I looked in there, and there's some serious gear where the passenger seat used to be. So what did you equip it with?
Well, I put in two 6-volt deep cycle golf cart batteries, 100-watt solar panel that I stow under my bunk so that I can just pull it out and point it toward the sun in any direction that needs to be. And it gave me plenty of room on the passenger side behind the batteries to have a 51-quart freezer, refrigerator, as well as a generator and all of the gear I need. And of course, with the bumper cargo racks front and back and the top, I had plenty of room inside. Didn't have to carry everything inside, so it worked out pretty well. And
you carried extra fuel with you too when you went up on the.
I took 15 gallons, 3 5-gallon gas tanks stored on the top. I originally planned on putting them on the front, and then somebody mentioned, well, what if one of them has a little bit of a leak? And yeah, that wasn't such a good idea. And I planned on putting them on the back, and then somebody said, well, what if somebody rear-ends you? So they ended up on the top, and they worked out just fine.
Yeah, most of the things we worry about happening never actually happen. But
true, but you never know.
Yeah, you never know, and that's the problem with being in a public forum is everyone's gonna say, well, all the reasons you can't do that.
Right. And well, those were good, 2 good suggestions.
Yeah, I agree, and I assume you had a fire extinguisher with you too.
Oh yeah, certainly. Oh yeah, and a carbon monoxide detector just in case.
Excellent. So you also brought extra water along. What did you use for your water tanks?
I just had a 6-gallon, or I think it was a 5-gallon water container I bought from Walmart for $15 or whatever, and that was sufficient. When I'm car camping, the only thing I need water for is making coffee in the morning, anyways. And there's always a stream nearby to wash my face off, if need be. And I travel rough. If I take a shower once a week, I feel uptown.
Yeah, we're all a little gritty out here at the RTR. I finally broke down, went to the truck stop after a couple of days because I wanted to go talk to other people, and I'm like, after 3 days, you can't tell if you stink, so I'm like, I don't know if I should go talk to people before I get a shower, so, but you go.
Everybody else is in the same situation, so
we're a little gritty out here. It is camping after all. So, that kind of proves that you don't have to put a lot of money. We're talking about a vehicle that, although John bought it new, it's an economical vehicle. Doesn't use a lot of gas, not that big. He's able to construct a bed, power needs inside that would be the envy of a lot of people. And how long were you out on that Alaska trip?
48 days.
48 days. Mm-hmm. Camping out of a Scion XB. So that's...
and boondocking all the way. I had 2 days in Canada, in Edmonton, that I stayed at a paid campground, and turned out full hookup, everything, electricity, showers, the whole 9 yards. It was $9 with a conversion.
Yeah, nice.
So that was kind of a nice respite. But every other day, I boondocked free camping everywhere, and it was beautiful nice. Locations.
Yeah, a lot of people that go on extended trips, they start thinking about, what am I going to do for the shower? What am I going to do for this and that? Or if I have to recharge my batteries, what if I don't have solar for a couple days? And you have to remember that there are campgrounds. What John and I do is boondock whenever possible on BLM land or whatnot. And but you can always stop at a campground. And I'll tell you, after you've been out in BLM land for a couple weeks, it feels like a luxury hotel.
Exactly so. And I was surprised to discover in Canada, I stopped at one of the tourist information areas and asked them about camping, boondocking, and was told that in Canada, and as it is in Alaska, unless there is a specifically marked area that says no overnight camping or no overnight parking, you're free to camp anywhere you want.
Nice.
And, of course, unless it's private property, which very little of it is. Most of it's wide open. And so that's pretty nice. You pull off wherever you want to.
Cool deal. I was in Scotland 2 years ago, and everyone listening to this podcast is going to say, yeah, I know the rule. And sorry, I don't have all the details. You have to look it up online. But they passed some law that allowed through camping, you can stop, pitch your tent anywhere along certain paths, even if it is on the edge of property, and you're guaranteed to not be hassled. Now, I don't know if that applies to vehicles, but it does apply to tent campers and backpackers. And I thought, yeah, that's a pretty neat
that's
perk.
A good idea. Yeah.
Pretty neat perk. So the Alaska trip, where did you cover? So you went up the first of all, where did you leave out of, and which route did you take up?
Well, I left from Burlington, Iowa, and went pretty much straight north to Portage, North Dakota, and crossed there. And then, oh goodness, I can't remember the provinces, Alberta, Saskatchewan, into the British Columbia, and then finally into the Yukon. And one of my first stops not only was Dawson City, the start of the actual Alcan, or the Alaskan Highway. They have a mile. The whole town is devoted to that that tourist theme. But anyway, one of my bucket list places was Lake LaBarge, the location of the Robert Service poem, "The Cremation of Sam McGee."
Oh.
And I camped overnight there, and then I went. The first time I drove on the top of the world highway from Dawson, Yukon, across to Tok, Alaska. And from there I went to Fairbanks, and from Fairbanks up to Barrow, or Dead Horse, Alaska, on the Arctic Ocean. And was lucky enough to swim in dunk in the Arctic Ocean, and got my polar bear certificate from my man cave.
I saw that video, and I thought, good God, no way, I'd have a heart attack. But did they let you actually drive up right to the edge of the Arctic Ocean?
No, you can only get about 15 miles away from it because it's all privately held land by the oil companies. But they sell excursions on a bus that I think it was $70, $69, something like that.
Jeez, it's not free. We're giving them the land for oil exploration. They're not making enough money on that.
No, and it's $7 a gallon if you need to buy gas up there. It's a nightmare, the prices. But it was a good experience, and that's where I discovered the mosquitoes.
Yeah, with all that water around, I can imagine. There are parts of Canada I've been to that are crazy with mosquitoes just because of all the lowland lakes and ponds and whatnot. So now that we're halfway through this bottle of rum, not all at once, you created quite a stir on YouTube with the infamous shower scene. So the people that, you're not going to be able to find this if you go on Facebook anymore, but I imagine a lot of people that hear this will remember the infamous shower scene. I I woke up and checked in on John and his trip and just about spit my Cheerios out. And I was like, what the hell is this all about? So go ahead, tell me the story.
Well, surprisingly enough, that evening, being alone and nothing to do, I had a couple of shots of whiskey, and I came up with this great idea. Part of what I do is DIY stuff, how to do this and how to do that. And I had a number of people tell me, ask me about showering. And I have a little device I bought from Amazon. It has a rechargeable battery, and you drop it in a bucket of water, and it pumps out just like a shower. And so I took a shower.
I noticed you didn't bother packing a shower curtain.
Yeah, no. As a matter of fact, and got more views and comments on that for the first 2 hours until Facebook threw me in jail for 24 hours.
Yes, like, as you said, everybody's got an ass and everybody takes a shower. We hope. So just so you know, on the podcast kingdom out there, that it wasn't full frontal nudity. It was done artfully and tastefully, but yeah, that was an interesting thing. How'd you like the shower pump? Did that work out?
Oh, very well. As a matter of fact, I've got it with me. I carry it almost everywhere just in case I need it. But yeah, it's a handy little device, $35, and it works like a sewing machine. It always runs.
I was looking at. I'm sure they're similar, or maybe we're looking at the same one. But I looked at that online. I was going to set up a shower before I came to RTR, but I just ran out of time, and that's what I was going to use, and pump it up to the roof to a black vinyl bladder first to take some of the winds out of it. Yeah,
sure.
And then recirculate it through the bucket. And with the Odyssey, and with the XB, the rear hatch folds up, and it's just about tall enough for me to stand under. So I'll probably attach the shower curtain to that. Yeah. Because I don't want to get thrown off Facebook.
Well,
yep. So how'd you like this rum anyway?
Oh, it's good. It's very good. I'm surprised. I have really don't recall half a dozen times in my life I've tasted rum. This is that's pretty good stuff.
Yeah, I never liked. I liked rum once, and that was the problem.
And
but
it's effective enough to make me think about taking another shower. You never know.
It comes in a nice bottle. It's a shame to throw this bottle away because it's leaded. It's not leaded crystal, but it almost looks like it's leaded crystal, and it's probably.
Well, we're going to have to empty that out today, so you can take it home with you.
Yeah, well, I've got a collection of them at home. You can turn it into a candle holder. So you recently moved to a bigger rig, which we're sitting in right now. So what year Winnebago is this?
It's a '92, 27-foot Chevy engine, Class A Winnebago Brave. And just happened to stumble across it. I was driving, as a matter of fact, heading out 120 miles away to look at one on a used car lot, and just happened to see this one out of the corner of my eye, and turned around and checked it out, and had my mechanic the next day, Dave Dingman, drove over from Burlington to look at it, and gave it a passing grade, and so I bought it, and tickled pink with it.
Nice. Is that the guy that's down here now?
Yep.
Okay. So we met him earlier as
best mechanic in the world. I'm joking about this, but how many mechanics can you find that'll drive 2,000 miles to make sure the engine's still running right?
Yeah, he came down to RTR, and it's his son, right, that's interested in building a schoolie. So they've got a little school bus seminar running this week, and he's going to get some ideas. And I spoke to him. The guy definitely knows what he's doing. Does he have a business in?
Yeah, he has a full-service diesel repair shop.
Do you remember the name of his shop? So
yeah, it's T&D Repair in Burlington, Iowa, on US 61, and does a heck of a job. I have a whole story about how I met Dave that one of these days I'll have to tell you about.
Oh, we're definitely going to have a follow-up podcast because John and I were shooting the shit last night, and he's got some pretty amazing stories. And I promised we wouldn't bring up age or generational differences or anything, but he said earlier he was in the Vietnam War, and Vietnam ended when I was 8 years old. So let that show you that it doesn't matter where you are in life, you can get out and make a change and do things. John has an extensive travel background, so we'll get into that in another episode of the podcast. And you recently acquired Derek the cat.
Yeah. I went to the local humane society with the idea to find a puppy, and saw this guy, and he looks almost identical to the cat, a cat that I have at home that I couldn't take with me because it would have been too big a change, and I'm afraid she wouldn't have liked it. But anyway, he caught my attention, and he was born in the Humane Society about 5.5 months before I walked in, and they told me he had 6 months before they had to euthanize him. And of course
that's the hard sell.
Yeah, and no, he's a fantastic companion, lots of fun, and of course, as I say, he spent 5.5 months his whole life in a little metal cage, and so inside this Winnebago, he thinks he's died and gone to Disneyland.
Well, I imagine you both have after being in an XB for a while. This has got to feel like a luxury apartment.
True.
and it is pretty spacious. This is about the most RV I can imagine wanting, because it's nice that it doesn't have slide out, so you don't have that complication, and it's narrow enough to get into places, and I imagine it handles reasonably well.
Oh, it drives like a car. Yeah, and other than being up so that you feel like you're on the bridge of the Titanic.
Well, that's good because you can anticipate what's going on ahead, I suppose. So you've traveled around the country. Can you think of a place that you would like to go back to, other than Alaska, obviously, but when you look back over the years and you think about all the places you traveled to, what's one place you'd like to get back to that you haven't made it back to yet?
Oh boy, I could.
The guy that's been everywhere.
Podcast, yeah. Well, as a matter of fact, on the back of my Scion, I have the motto, been there, done that, going back to do it again. Tons of places, lots of places that in the past that I've been to, but I didn't have enough time to really experience everything. And I remember first time going to New York City, for God's sake. I was young enough so that I was self-conscious, and I made a point of not looking up because I didn't want to look like a tourist.
I've done the same thing, yeah. I know.
Oh, that's a shame. I'd love to go back and look up.
Well, it's certainly developed over the years, and I'll tell you one thing, it doesn't smell any less like pee than it used to, so
yeah, I'm sure.
That goes along with it. But so where can people find you if they want to follow your future adventures and comment along?
Well,
all right, we took a quick break there. John's phone rang. But yeah.
Well, I have two Facebook groups. The first being camping out and catching trout, and close to 2,000 followers, I guess. Just formed that about 5 years ago. Just people into camping out and catching trout.
And that's how I found you, actually, for that group.
And then after my last Alaska trip, the most common question I got was about bears. Aren't you afraid of bears? And aren't you afraid of this? And I have a hatch tent that I put on the back of my Scion just to give me extra room when the weather's nice. And so many people said, well, a bear could easily get in there. Well, I have seen probably thousands of black bears and hundreds of grizzlies, and I have never had any kind of a problem with bears, so I'm not concerned about it. Of course, I'm not foolish enough to walk up to make a selfie with my arm around a grizzly's neck, as some people unfortunately are. But nevertheless, I started signing my posts, Bag My. That's my second group on Facebook, Bag My, B-A-G-M-Y, and as Darren mentioned, that stands for Bears Ain't Got Me Yet. That seemed to catch on.
That's great. Yep. So I'll be in those groups watching your future adventures, of course. We'll stay in communication, and I want to get a little more your travel stories in the future as this podcast develops. We'll see. This is actually the first, I'll let you guys in. I may actually use this for the first actual podcast, your interview. So there you go. You're a star.
Hopefully that doesn't kill it. Nip it in the bud.
I'm blaming you if it kills it.
There you go.
But yeah, we'll stick it up there, and we'll get back to John in the future because he's going to be traveling other places, and you can follow him online at those two places. I have one more question, and that is about your solar panel out there sitting on the ground. Is that the one you brought with you to Alaska?
No, actually, I just bought that one right before I left on this trip. I had a 100-watt solar, one of the three that I've got now, and then since I've been here, I bought two more 100-watters, and that's a 140. And but
is that's a Renogy brand, or?
I believe it is. I believe it is. I'm not sure.
Looks like it, although a lot of them are getting similar. This is not a Renogy commercial, and they're not sponsoring or anything, but I was kind of my website, I try to keep things thrifty. And so I was against paying for a brand name, and I went with an off-brand name. But I recently bought a Renogy panel and compared to between 50 and 60 watt panels, depending on what spec you believe. Comparing the two, I got a much higher voltage out of the Renogy, and why that's important is I'm able to charge in lower light than I could in the past. Now, you may not get all the power, but at least there's something coming out of it, where the other one, if it was cloudy at all, it would never get above 12 volts.
Yeah.
So I've been pretty pleased with it, and the prices have come down. It's maybe 20% more. So you know, if there's one recommendation I'd make to people, that watch the sales and the prices, but the Renogy panels, I've been pretty pleased with it, and it's bolted to my roof and stayed on it so far with a few thousand miles at 80 miles an hour, so that's some kind of endorsement.
Well, it's going to stay there, I'm sure, unless it decides to make a convertible out of your Odyssey.
The weak part is probably the 4 M6 studs, which are about like a quarter 20, and the factory roof rack, I think, is rated at like 350 pounds or something, so I thought, well, I should be able to take it. But as I'm driving down the road, I thought, well, they're probably putting weight on it, not pulling up. And this is essentially a lifting wing on the back, so I'm going to seal the front of it. It's on my to-do list to...
You might want to put a little plastic fairing just to direct the air over the top of it.
Yeah, some kind of lip on the... that's probably a good idea. So, well, you can watch that on my website on odysseycamper.com and see how that develops, and people have to make comments about all things I should have done differently too, and that's how we all learn. So, well, thanks for the interview, Doc. We'll talk again. Actually, we'll be talking and finishing off this bottle of rum shortly after, but we'll get you back on here and talk about your travel stories in the future.
And the royalty check, when can I expect?
Yeah, so the check's in the mail, and I'll use the Google. As soon as I get 1,000 subscribers, we'll start to pay. But I also have to have 4,000 viewing or listening hours. So sometime in you're free in 2040, right?
There
Just tell me where to mail
well,
the check.
the next podcast we do, I'll teach Derek to start speaking. That'll guaranteed boost the ratings.
Yeah, I always say if you wanna make YouTube money, do a cat video or
hot chicks.
Yeah, there you go. Guys are guaranteed to click on the hot chick thumbnail. All right, thanks again, Doc. Talk to you soon.
You bet.
I'd like to thank John Leathers for the opportunity to interview him. I think that's going to be a hard one to top. He's an interesting guy, and I hope to interview him again in the future. If you listen to the end of the podcast, there's an outtake from the interview based on a conversation we had after the main segment. Since this is the first episode of the show, I'll explain that it's my intent to have 2 segments in every episode. The first will be a guest interview, and the second will be a discussion of topics relevant to the tiny RV traveler. In segment 2 of this episode, we'll talk about keeping clean in a tiny RV. Not every tiny RV has a sink or even an onboard water tank. So how do you get clean when you have limited facilities? If you're traveling in a tiny RV, you're probably living outside most of the time. Being outside or being a bit dustier than usual are part of the world you've entered, but that doesn't mean you have to live like an animal. There are lots of ways to stay clean. Here are a couple that I like. Number 1, baby wipes. Not every bed of dirt requires immersion in water to get clean. For simple cleanup of hands, face, and the occasional armpit, baby wipes are hard to beat. They come in their own container and you can bring them to the loo or wherever. Just remember that not all these products are flushable or compostable, so read the label and learn where to dispose of them. If you're a big tough guy that doesn't like the sound of, quote, baby wipes, I found a similar product at Walmart called Dude Wipes. They look like baby wipes, they smell like baby wipes, but on the outside they say Dude Wipes, so you're cool. Number 2, hand sanitizer. Even after washing up, I always use hand sanitizer before and after preparing food. Also, a lot of camp toilets don't have running water, and this is the next best thing until you have a chance to wash your hands. To do that and to wash up before bed, I fill a small bowl with water. Do all your soap work first, and then empty and rinse off with a bowl of fresh water. If you're into boondocking, use the rinse water to thoroughly wash any soapy water into the dirt. Number 3, showers. Chances are about 50-50 that your tiny RV will have a shower. My minivan certainly doesn't, but there are ways to get cleaner than handy wipes or a basin. A small pump sprayer like you would use to spray insecticide does a pretty good job of rinsing the soap off. Just make sure it's a new one that has never held chemicals. You can also find a USB rechargeable immersion pump with a spray head that seems to work quite well. You drop it in a bowl or a bucket of water. I'll put links to examples of these in the show notes. Obviously, if you're staying at a paid campground, there are probably showers of some kind, but when you're boondocking, camping without hookups, or on the move, truck stop showers can be a convenient solution. The reputable chains like Love's and Pilot are clean and safe for men and women. Check out the link to my blog post about this in the show notes. Number 4, health club memberships. A lot of full-time travelers and van dwellers prefer to buy a Planet Fitness membership and use the facilities for workouts and showers. In my opinion, this fits full-time van dwellers better. Health clubs are usually in or near cities, and I like to avoid those. So it's not the best solution for me, but it may be for you. Number 5, lakes. If you're boondocking, don't forget about lakes. You may not get completely clean, but you generally will come out cleaner than you went in. Last, if you're just starting out, remember that you can always treat yourself to the occasional night in a campground or even a motel. Nothing says you have to be in the RV every single night. Okay, if you stuck around until the end of this episode, thank you. I've never conducted an interview or done a podcast before now, and I promise to get better at it. For those of you that stayed until the end, here's the last segment of the interview with Dr. John. After the interview with Dr. John, we were sitting around just BSing about a couple things, and he was talking about his hang glider days. And I didn't think to start the recorder again until he was halfway through the story, but you'll understand why it's relevant. And we talk a little bit about fear, and we talk about getting the guts up to go out on the road full time and things like that. And if you listen this far, then you think the podcast's interesting to some degree, and you'll probably enjoy this clip. So consider it an unprofessional side interview, but I think you'll like it.
Mountain, needless to say, and no one had flown off the back of it. And the back of it drops off like 800 feet or 600 feet straight down, and then another 600 feet of an angle, the gradual slope. And naturally, trying to build up my hang glider business, I called the newspapers and called the local TV station, and they came down, and they wanted photographs of me standing on the edge without the kite, right? And sure, not a problem. I had my harness on and everything. The kite was behind me. I walked over the edge, and I got so nervous. Oh my God, my stomach was just rolling. And it's a hell of a long ways down there.
Yeah, no kite and no parachute.
Now, that was a big mistake, because it took another 20 minutes after I strapped into the kite before the wind was right. And I finally jumped off. But previously, and every time after that, I just hook up the kite and barrel off. Nothing to it. But boy, you stand over there without any safety.
So there's one question that I want to ask you that I had forgot to put at the end of the podcast, so this is a little addendum at the end. Yep. And it's about fear. It's about, the people are afraid to take the plunge. I might go broke if I go on the road. I might break down. And I hear all the time from women, and this is, justified concern.
Sure.
They're worried about being out there
personal
alone.
Safety.
So what advice would you give people, especially people that are much younger and they're afraid to take the chance? What life advice would you give them? You've lived a bit.
I've always been afraid of heights, like you, and walking up to that edge without a kite. Honest to God, it scared the shit out of me. And I thought, well, I've got to do it now. I've got the TV people up here. I can't back out now. But I did not want to fly that day, and I made hundreds of flights without any issue.
But you just took the plunge.
Well, I was forced into it. At that time. Previous to that, I never really thought about it. It just there's something I want to do, and shit, do it. I don't know.
Well, that was the day you realized you were mortal.
Yeah. I think that, unfortunately, a lot of people are just raised to be afraid. That's their lifestyle, and I don't know how to get over that. I really don't. Honestly, if that's the way that your mindset is, mine never has been. Mine has always been go for it. Until I'm faced with something where I realize I'm going to die. Then common sense does kick in finally.
You really can't undo that evolution
right.
in the back of your mind. Yeah, I'm not that way. I'm not, not timid, but I'm a little more cautious than most people. And I noticed a lot in my dad when he got older. He's passed, so I can talk about him. As he got older, he's always thinking about everything that can go wrong. And not everything that could go right. Yeah. And it's what if you do this? Do you have enough money for this? And I'm not saying go out with zero planning, but you can always find something to be afraid of to hold you back.
True.
And I was watching online the RTR chatter group about people talking about coming down here, and oh, rain's forecast, you're all going to wash away in a flood, and you won't be able to get through the road. And I said, ooh, that's a big gully. I wonder what that'll look like after 3,000 cars. But it didn't stop me from coming down here. And of course, it rained and everything's fine. So far, I haven't heard of anyone that drowned in a mud puddle. We had one vehicle here. We thought the gentleman might have. We haven't seen him in a couple days, let's just say, and we went and checked on him. And that's the thing. You get in a group like this, and everyone's checking on everyone, and that fear of being alone, by yourself camping. I've been in spooky places where you're like, it's a little creepy, and so I put some motion detecting lights together to show people that you can build, a solar light and stick it on your vehicle, and that keep the boogeyman away.
Deterrent, and peace of mind for yourself.
Peace of mind. You can see what's out there, and usually it's a raccoon if it's anything. And I think the people you're worried about running into, they're not out in the middle of the desert, unless you're down on the border or something and you happen to be in a drug running area. And there are signs, when you get down to those areas to warn you off. It's super unlikely, and the statistics prove it out. That
it's not a profitable place for crooks. Not enough high value targets out here.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, what's he gonna take from you? And people worry about that. I'm surprised how many people worry about this, and especially. And I get it, but here's the thing: if you're a criminal, you're approaching an RV in the middle of nowhere in the middle of the night, and you don't know if that guy's armed or what's going on in there, and a lot of people are. I wouldn't approach it. There's not enough value in, like you say, unless I mistook him for somebody else or whatnot. But I think fear keeps a lot of people from.
Oh, certainly, absolutely.
Sometimes you just got to hold your breath and jump in the cold water. All right. Well, see that little addendum we did at the end there. That's going to be more of that in the future when we get back together with Doc and do another interview after his next adventure. Thanks for listening. With that, we've reached the end of episode 1, but before I go, I should say that shortly after this interview, Dr. John's RV went up in flames. Luckily, he and Derek, the cat, got out, but he lost almost everything he had and had to transition back to the Scion. If you enjoyed this show and you want to give something back, don't send me anything, pay it forward by contributing to John's fundraiser. There's a link in the notes, and if you can toss him a buck or two, it'd really help him out. Thanks again for listening, and don't forget the items that I talked about will be in the show notes.